All right, I call this meeting to order at 6:07 PM. Madam Clerk, can we do roll call, please? Director Burnworth? Here. Director Goodsow? Here. Director Medard? Director Proctor?
Here.
Director Berger? Here. Director Van Beck?
Here.
And Director Berger.
Present.
Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to consider approval of the agenda. In the case of an emergency, items may be added to the agenda by a majority vote of the Board of Directors. An emergency is defined as a work stoppage, a crippling disaster, or other activity that severely impairs public health, safety, or both. Items on the agenda may be taken out of sequential order as their priority is determined by the Board of Directors. The board may take action on any item appearing on the agenda. I have a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, so there's a closed session at the front end of the agenda. If you would like, or if the board would like, we could entertain just reorganizing the agenda to move that closed session to the end of the board meeting if you want. Or keep it at the front end, just whatever. I just wanted to point that out.
I'm good if we move it to the
Yeah.
end. I would go ahead and move to approve moving the closed session to the close of the end of the meeting.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to item 6, public comments. At this time, the board will hear comments on any non-agenda item. If any person wishes to be heard, they shall stand, address the president, identify themselves, and state the subject for the comment. Time limit for each speaker is 3 minutes per item to address the board. Individuals who wish to speak on multiple items will be allowed 4 minutes in total. A total of 15 minutes shall be allocated for each item for all members of the public. The board may find it necessary to limit the total time allowable for all public comments on items not appearing on the agenda to any 1 hour, to any one meeting to 1 hour. Do we have anybody here for public comment? Mr. Rubin.
Afternoon, Judge and Chair Beckett. I'm sorry that your negotiations with Alfinco haven't been smooth. I'm sure you're going to work that out. They don't seem to get the urgency of what's going on. And losing another $8 million since May doesn't seem to bother them. Well, and I know it bothers you guys because you're going to inherit all of these problems. And I just want to reaffirm that the community really is behind you. And some of the comments might have that your chairman or chairlady made at the board meeting time before last might have been a little bit harsh. And some of them had nothing to do with the future. It was past. But my biggest concern, and I would like if you can possibly do it either in the CEO's report or in your attorney's report, give us some kind of an update what's going on with those things, if you could. But, you know, again, they've lost 16 million, and depending on how you treat a $1 million income that they got on a research for asthma, and I don't know whether they already spent that money or the money is to be spent. But that came in what they claim as turning the system around and making, at least bringing it to break even. But when you add that $1 million or take it out, they lost, in that 2 or 3 months period, they still lost money. But, and the next question would be when you're going to have your meeting to tell us how you're going to pay all this money back. Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to board comments. Do we have any reports from any board members on meetings or events attended? We scheduled. We have a report from the Education Outreach Ad hoc.
Yes, at this time, we had organized through our PR party an interview with Univision for Mr. President Burnsworth. That was today regarding the federal aid and cuts. And then continuing our digital TV streaming and local radio efforts on Stronger Together effort. Continuing print efforts as well with local newspapers on Stronger Together efforts, and continuing marketing efforts in conjunction with South Central Regional Medical Center, meeting and keeping them appraised in order to be on the same page regarding branding and messaging moving forward. That concludes my report.
Do you have any reports from negotiations?
No report, other than to, let the public know that we're continuing to work with the city of El Centro to get to approval of the asset transfer agreement, which we hope will happen next week, or at their subsequent regular meeting or special meeting.
So we've approved it, ECRMC's approved it, we're just waiting on the city.
Correct. So we've approved the asset transfer agreement. ECRMC approved the asset transfer agreement. And the city of El Centro had it on their agenda, had to pull it, and we hope to see it on their agenda soon.
Now move on to consent calendar. Any member of the board may request that items for the consent calendar be removed for discussion. Items so removed shall be acted upon separately, immediately following approval of items remaining on the consent calendar. Have a motion.
I move to approve.
I second.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now we'll start with item 9, items for discussion and or board action. We have items A through G, which are policies and procedures. And if any of the board wants to pull those and ask questions, if not, I'll entertain a motion for items A through G.
I would move to approve items A through G.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Now move on to item H. Staff recommends action to authorize purchase of 1 BD fiber dust oleum laser system with Carol Bojorquez. But she is not here. So who's Carol tonight?
I can actually do that, and it's actually for Dr. Dahara, so.
It's for urology department, not for
Yeah,
me.
well, you're the one that'll be using it, nobody else, yeah, nobody else will. They really should. And so those are just for him. Do you want to tell him a little bit about what it's for, and what it's used for?
Yes, sir, I will do that. Thank you. Madam President, members. So the laser system is nothing new. The laser has been used for almost 20+ years for kidney stone. Kidney stone is one of the most common, we call it bread and butter urology. Almost 50% of our patient population is stones. We see all kinds of stones, young and old. And the system we have is at least 20 years old. They don't even make those spare parts, and it's very ineffective. It's just like using a small torch for a very big room. You need the light. It's very difficult and it affects the quality of care we provide. Patients keep coming back and the first question they ask when they come out, when they did you get all the stones out? And I tell them, no, I could not. You can see the disappointment. So this new system is, there are many marketing people, they're all similar. And the system that they chose is very good. We have tried it here on a couple of patients and I'm satisfied. I think it's a good choice. Thank you for considering that.
Thank you. I'm happy to see that you can get a new machine to take care of the patients after 20 years, considering it's really not that big of a purchase. Do you have any other questions by the board?
I do. So with regard to the, it says after the 2-year service coverage, we may choose to purchase an additional 3-year coverage for 12,000. Would it be cheaper if we get that extended coverage now? What do you think, Doctor?
Probably so, sir. I'm not well versed with how this works. I think I need to.
And sometimes they don't allow us to do that. They allow us like this is initial and then you add on after that. And then because it's also based off of the age of the equipment and how long they'll do it. So eventually it'll end up going year to year.
That's all.
Have any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the purchase of the DE Suter Ortho Drive Sagittal Saw Handpiece
Wrong
and rotary.
item.
Oh, is that wrong? I'm sorry. Yeah,
So I'll take a notion. No, it's sold.
yeah, thanks. I'll second it. I'll second it. Item H.
I have a motion by Berger and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Good, best of luck on your new toy, Dr. Natada.
Thanks.
Move on to item I, staff recommends action to authorize purchase of a D Souter Ortho Drive Sagittal Saw handpiece and rotary handpiece power system.
So same kind of situation. This allows us with the amount of work that we're doing in the ortho department to have our turnover happen more quickly by adding this to that, to our group. It is something that we have budgeted for. And again, it'll improve our workflow and being able to take care of the patients more timely.
If anybody has any questions, I would make a motion that we approve the purchase. I'm not sure, it gave me great comfort to see that it looks like something my husband uses out of the garage.
I second it.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Does that plug in a 220?
Any opposed?
It's more please.
Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. We'll move on to item J. Renewal of annual agreement between Dr. Terrence Mulvaney and Imperial Valley Healthcare District, DBA Pioneers Memorial Hospital, whereby Dr. Mulvaney will provide occupational medicine services to employees of IVHD.
So this is the agreement that we have for any of our our staff members when they get hurt. We send them over there to have the workups done and so forth for any of our working comp type stuff.
Have any questions?
Is there an existing contract?
Yes, yep. So this is just renewing it, giving us another year on it. Same price as before. Nothing's really changed on it. It's up now. We need to add it again.
Do you have a motion? I still move to approve letter J.
Second.
I have a motion by Berger and a second by Valdez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. We'll move on to item K. Authorization to approve professional service agreement and emergency on-call for Dr. Idris Solomon. Are there more?
So this agreement is a professional service agreement emergency call for Dr. Idris Suleiman. This is a new contract, not a renewal, to provide gastroenterology services for IVHD. There is an initial base compensation and there is an incentive structure to that. We started at the median. There is a sign-on bonus of 10,000 to be paid within 1 week of signing. The base compensation includes 3 days of call. Anything outside of the 3 days, weekdays is 500, weekends is 1,000. This will help with our overall service line. We do transfer a lot of GI out. He will be here Mondays and Tuesdays. Clinic and OR here at Pioneers, and then Valley Endoscopy on Tuesdays. And the discussions are he will take call Mondays and Tuesdays, and then 1 week in a month, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So there will be an increase in call pay, why the contract value is.
One question, does he do, fluoroscopy?
Yes, he's working on that.
Is there any accountability measures in the contract?
And this one, no, there is, as far as if their notes aren't locked, then they don't get paid, that type of thing, but not any other.
So like,
No, like,
There's qualification language, I wanna say. I'm looking at.
I think it's right in the beginning,
Yeah, I think it's right as speaking.
on item B. But if you're looking like quality metrics, we don't have that.
no, I'm looking more like, so we'll say like a doctor gets like on call. Say he gets a call, he's on call, but doesn't show up, right? Is there accountability measures so we can hold the doctor accountable, right? And reprimand them if that, because because the doctors are not our employees, right? But at the same time, we need ways to be able to hold them accountable, such as we do an employee. So if they're on call and they don't show up, what are we gonna do, right? For us, it's like, well, now that patient's not getting the service, but how do we as an organization say that's not okay? And what can we have?
So initially,
Yeah.
if something like that happens, then initially those conversations would be with Dr. Indahara and myself, and I would go to him and say, hey, we've got a problem with Dr. X, who isn't taking call or isn't actually on call when they're on call, whatever the case might be. And then allow them as the med staff to have that initial conversation. And then if those things continue to happen beyond that, that initial conversation, then it'd be the same thing. We document that, we use the language within the contract that basically says, hey, we can cut this and you have X amount of time to fix the remedy situation or the contract's done.
There's also like loan forgiveness aspect tied to time. So if they didn't stay for the amount of time that's in their contract, that loan would be forgiven. But they'd have to, there is like downside for them for being dismissed or not, or being let go. Yeah.
Is there anything in any of the call contracts, that actually state that they have a certain amount of time to, answer the phone to the ER or answer the phone to the requesting consultation? I don't, like 30 minutes. What is the guidelines, the regulations?
The regulations are 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah, you have to, like if it's an ER call type of thing, then you have to report within 30 minutes.
Is that in our contract?
So the contracts state, under qualifications, under B and C, that they have to comply with standards, local rules and regulations of federal, state, and local agencies, departments, commissions, associations. So that's sort of where that would get covered. And then a lot of the almost like policy level stuff that applies to all the physicians is found in the regs or our internal policies. Yeah, our, like the med staff.
So you're assuming that the doctor read all this? And
Yes.
knows it?
Well, like, I'm just asking,
Yeah,
like,
patient.
what we have in place now, is it effective? And I'm not picking on this particular doctor at all. But I'm just acting like our accountability measures that we have in the doctor's contract, are they effective right now? Is it working? Because if it's not, then I think in the contracts is a place to fix it.
Right. And I believe that's a contractual, agreement. I don't know how it would go to MEC, yeah, probably, but as far as patient care and contracts, it's kind of different. Okay. So that would be administrative, that would be.
Right, but we always go through the MEC first, have that conversation so they can have that like provider to
Right.
provider.
I think that should be a group conversation.
And that's the hard part is because of how it is set up, because they have an obligation based off of what the bylaws are to the med staff as well. And so that's why we always start there. And then if it continues, then that's when we start to go the other route.
So Chris, so what's the mechanism? Say any particular doctor doesn't show up within the 30 minutes. What's the mechanism to report out that, hey, this doctor didn't show up? Do we need to call another doctor, or how does that work for you to know at the end of the day that this doctor failed to show up?
That would generally come from in most cases, like with this, it'd be like the ER, because the ER providers will be upset with the fact that it's not happening. And then they'll usually send it to like Dr. Nelson, who is their director. And then Dr. Nelson will then forward that information on to me and usually gives me like a little rundown of here's what happened, here's the times that we called, here's when, didn't answer, here's when they finally called back, here's when they showed up, or whatever the case might be. And so it would come to me from that perspective, or in that way.
So when they're on call, it's not necessarily an emergency situation, because if the doctor doesn't show up, is another doctor that's in the ER going to be able to take care of the issue?
No, in some of those cases, we end up sending them out.
As a result of the doctor not showing up because
Right,
they're on
that can
call.
be the case, correct.
Well, wouldn't that be more cost to the hospital then, if that happens?
It's not necessarily more cost to the hospital as much as it's like, obviously, we would miss out on the revenue to that. The biggest issue is the situation that puts the patient in at that point in time, because they're able to have a service that's being provided locally where they're closer to home and closer to family and so forth. And now they are going to end up in either San Diego, Palm Springs, and much further away. And then you have to figure out how do we get back home and all that good stuff. So.
And then another question, are the doctors, I know this one's probably specialized, right? But are the doctors like on a rotation to be on call, or how does that work?
So each specialty is a little bit different. And so they do rotate. So like the OB group, they have a calendar, and, we talk to them about like the number, how many they should be taking, because there's X amount of them and there's X amount of days. So they should be taking X amount of call, and they do that and they cover. In this case, like with this one, this is where it's a little bit different, right? Because we have a GI person who is technically in the initial stages with us is going to be part-time. And there's no way that we're going to have this one person that's going to cover 30 days a month, right? It just doesn't work. And so we have the amount of call that's within the contract. If he picks up extra, we have a mechanism to pay him for that. And so some of it's going to be based off of that. And we have situations where we have smaller numbers for certain specialties. And so there's holes in the coverage as far as that goes, because they take so much call and then we don't have anybody, and then they take so much calls and then we don't have anybody.
And then my final question is, the way we do on-call here at PMH, is it mirror like what they do at El Centro Regional, or is it different?
Yeah, it's pretty close to standard. Yeah. So those will be like, we've had some of that conversation too, as far as how that works. There was some good conversation here about a week and a half ago on that between the two organizations, actually related to GI, and how that works for call. And there's a lot of issues that kind of stem from understanding what EMTALA is and what that means for some of the providers. So, like we have situations where we provide call for ortho, for example, and they don't have call for ortho at that point in time in El Centro. So if El Centro has a situation where they have somebody who needs ortho, and then they call over here and say, hey, we don't have anybody, you got somebody on call for ortho, then we have to take them. And Tala says we've got to take them. In some cases, our providers will say, no, I don't have to do that because I'm not on call for El Centro, so I'm not seeing that patient. So those are some of the issues, more of the issues that we kind of run into, as opposed to, the other side of that, so.
So, well, if we're all gonna be one district ultimately, then why would a provider say, I'm not in call for all centers, just because it's the facility and the doctor didn't happen to show up at that one facility over there?
No, from the conversations that we've already had, it's all stemmed around, hey, if they're gonna take call for El Centro too, they want to be paid more to do that, even though they're here. Then again, there's an understanding with how EMTALA works that they can't necessarily do that. But that's the idea behind it, is they're saying, if you want us to take call for both places, you gotta pay us more money to do that. And so the pay is kind of the biggest piece that's tied to that right now.
Question, so like, what about, right, so like, say you have a doctor, and I'm just, this is on there, so I'm asking, like, I just want to make sure that the team has the tools they can to be accountable. So like, say that, you know, this particular doctor is supposed to show up at clinic at 8 AM, but they don't get there till 9, right? So is there a way to cut their stipend for that? Right, because now, like, they're not showing up to their contracted hours, right? Because at the end of the day, right, so like, say they start booking patients at 8, doctor doesn't show up till 9, well, then the whole organization gets a bad rap. The patients are pissed, they're spending more time away from their job and all of that, and we need to be able to hold these providers accountable so this doesn't happen, because this is a huge issue throughout the county.
For our physicians that are normally on PSAs like this type of PSA, we don't normally have those issues because they have their schedule. Now, we start the patients at 8, so we start registering them so that they're ready for when the doctor comes in. So maybe they'll come in at 8:30, 8:45, but a lot of times they'll be in the hospital doing rounds before they'll get to clinic. Where we do see those instances is physicians that we have contracts for specialties that they just come in once a month or twice a month, and they have their private practice and then they're coming in. We do see issues like that, where there's like an hour or 2 wait, and, you know, currently right now we have one that I'm gonna have to sit down and talk with, and maybe that's just not something we continue, because it's causing, patient satisfaction issues.
Yeah, right, and so that's mostly what I'm asking is, you guys as the admin team, do you guys have the tools in this contract? Because now's the time to do it as they're coming up for renewal. And, you know, make sure that language is in there. So if there's more language you would like to put in there, you know, let us know. We're very receptive because we want to make sure that you guys have all the tools to be able to hold everybody accountable. Can you step to the podium? Yeah.
John Grass, president here in Raleigh. I wondered that this is a good point of discussion because I have a person that is an attendee of our church, member of our church, had an issue with a surgical complication a few years ago. And he showed up at the emergency room, and the surgeon's backup didn't show up. And so complications arose, it became septic, he had to be flown out. And as a matter, he had to, basically he was disabled for about 4 years as he recovered. So my question is twofold, is that for covering physicians, for situations like that, what is our arrangement? What are the policies, the hospital protocols for physicians who are covering other physicians and their obligations? The other thing that I learned that in the course of the litigation that followed, the hospital was not held responsible, but the physician was. But I learned that to my shock, the physician only carried $1 million worth of coverage. And as a psychotherapist, I cover $1 million or $3 million worth of coverage, $1 million per occurrence. For a surgeon, I would think that would be a whole lot more than $1 million worth of coverage. So I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration in the course of this discussion.
I appreciate your comments. And that's awful what happened to your friend. That's awful what happened to your church colleague.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
he's still in
absolutely
trouble with that.
I mean, and that's kind of like, you know, and it starts with like accountability, right? You know, and so
I had a question.
like say somebody doesn't show up, is there a way for us to cut their stipend? Like, say you show up late, is there a penalty for them? Like, I want to
The hard part is that it's like, most of these aren't set up kind of just like she said, there's nothing within their contract that says you show up at 8, you leave at 5, that kind of thing. You know, we run into those situations where they show up late. We also, on the flip side of that too, the physician shows up on time, but the patient shows up late. So there's issues from that perspective. The other side of it that we probably have that I would say, that we run into more issues with is when we set up times and we have clinics set up, but then the provider cancels them and changes it. And now you've got, like, especially for some of our harder to get in ones, you have a situation where the patient's been waiting for 3 weeks to get in, and now for whatever reason, it's being canceled, and now they're gonna have to be pushed out. And then we'll have situations where they're called back in, like, oh, we've got a time for you, and then, well, sorry, we canceled it again. And that makes it very difficult. So the language that's in there doesn't necessarily cover that. And in some cases, depending on how it's set up as well, they're covered by like RVU, so they're paid by the RVU instead of like a set rate. And so it's based off of the work that they actually do. So there's not necessarily a time piece attached to that. So there's a whole bunch of issues that really, I would say that we have in for us as pioneers in particular, that that we can definitely be doing. I mean, I agree with you guys 100%. We can definitely be doing a much better job for our patients than we are right now, because we really do cater more to like whatever the provider wants to do, because that's kind of, we got to have the provider. And so, and then in some cases, the provider just does whatever they want to do. And in some cases, they won't even notify us. They might tell their staff that they're going to take the time off, but they actually don't tell administration that they want to take the time off, or that they're going to cancel clinics, or that they're going to do this, or they're going to do that. And so those are some of the issues that we run into as well. And so in those situations, we try to have those conversations with those providers, find out why, let's not have this happen again, and try to have those conversations to minimize the issues that we have with the patient's disruption in those cases. It's a pretty difficult, it's a balancing act. It really is.
And going back to the call too, not all service line specialties, it's not mandatory for them to take call. So GI is one of them where they don't have to, we don't have to have it. But like general surgery, you do.
It's a key place.
Yeah, and we want to have
So
it
we want to have it.
because
So
we
this
do
is-
send that stuff.
As they do transfer them.
Yeah.
So this is, an added service that we're able to give to our community.
Quick question regarding the scenario where a doctor may not want to, not picking on doctors, right, or doctors, where doctors may not want to go to El Centro, they want to only be in Raleigh, or whatever the case may be. So in our agreement, we're identifying the locations of our district. Could we have the language in here saying, basically stating that if we get in the contract with the doctor on call, they're willing to participate anywhere in our district that we need them?
Right. So in most cases, right, it wouldn't be a matter of going to El Centro. It would be El Centro sending them here and then taking care of them. And they're like, well, I'm not on call for El Centro, so don't send that patient over because that's an El Centro patient.
But let's say we merge, right?
But it depends on,
I think either way, like, a patient is a patient. It's a
Right.
patient in New
But-
County. Like, I don't care where they live.
exactly, you don't even know, like, that person could technically be a Brawley resident who is
Yeah.
down in El Centro and, but to answer your question a little bit more fully, depending on what it is, they may not even have the service over there. So they're not gonna go over to El Centro to provide that service because they don't have the equipment for it and they don't provide that service. They would send them here to get that service. And so it's not a situation where we can say, well, they're over there, go over there. And it's also a scenario where when you're talking about a provider being on call, you don't want them running back and forth, because that becomes problematic too, because now if the situation is you see them where they're at, and you have multiple, like 2-3 people that are coming in relatively close at the same time, you're going to delay care with the provider moving back and forth, as opposed to taking them in an ambulance while they're taking care of a patient over here, then they can come in and they can be seen right after. And so that's part of the coordination of care that will have to happen as we go through this process, as far as like okay, what services are gonna be provided where, making sure they know that, because that's the other piece too, from the ambulance perspective. If it is something that is going to only be provided here or only be provided at El Centro, then they just need to go there instead of here or there. They just need to take them where that service is provided. And so that's part of what we're doing through that strategic planning process with UCSD right now, looking at the service lines and how that will play out. Obviously, that's a big part of what we'll be looking at with the master planning process and how it will shape this campus and the El Centro campus, so that we can be more efficient with that. Because the work that the providers do, like they could have a night where, you know, there's nothing, and then they have another night where they're doing 5 things, and then they're also supposed to get up and go to a clinic the next morning at 8 o'clock, and that's tough to do. And so we want to be mindful of where we can provide the service, but we want to be efficient with it so that we don't have issues from a patient perspective and we don't have issues from a provider perspective.
Is there a way in their contract we can put, like, so say, you know, if they're scheduled to be, you know, anywhere, so they're scheduled to be there at 8, and they don't show up till 9, is there a way we can doctor pay, or, you know, find out, like, you know, they have to pay, you know, so, I mean, something, right? It's like, because we gotta be able to, I mean,
That's
I
it.
mean, the teeth in that's very specific.
or I'm like talking like in general, right? If we can make it,
Well, the teeth are in Exhibit B, the practitioner coverage, that say you shall provide a minimum of 8 hours per day, 4 days a week, or 2 days a week, or however many days a week we've negotiated with them. And in addition, you have to be there for the time necessary for charting and keeping medical records current and accurate. And if they continuously fail, I mean, if it's a one-time thing and they fail to do that, they fail to provide their 8 hours that day, it's a breach of the contract. Are we gonna bring a breach of contract action against the doctor the first time they do it? Probably not. That's where sort of leadership and collaboration, coordination comes in. But if we had a doctor who was habitually late or habitually not providing 8 hours, that would be a breach of contract action. And that's your sort of teeth. But, you know, if you wanted to get specific enough to say any hour that can be documented, you know, that you don't, you know, rounding up to the 1/6 of an hour, or however you want to say it, that can be documented, because you guys don't punch in. Yeah. So, you know, there have to be a sort of reporting system in place, because this isn't punch in, punch out, where you can prove that you were here for 8 hours.
yeah.
So we would have to figure out a system, first of all. Like, if we put it in the contract, we could put it in the contract. Doctors probably wouldn't like it, and there would probably need to be some like provision for emergencies, or provision for, like, if they didn't have a client that morning, or so they didn't need to be in here that day,
Or you have a situation, since Dr. Naharis, you already used him, where he's actually doing surgery. He was supposed to start at 8, but the surgery went over. And so he's not going to show up there until 9. So you'll have stuff like that happens. And I think that it kind of goes back to a little bit of because I get where you're going with it. And there's some stuff that'd be nice to be able to have a little bit more teeth in that. But the reality is, for a majority of the providers, right, it's not an issue. It's just some providers it's an issue for. And when you look at the same kind of thing as we manage the process with our other staff as well, you know, realistically, we're dealing with people who are adults and should be adults. And so the more language like that you put into a contract, the less likely that somebody would be to be like, why do I have to do that? Like, yeah, like I don't have to do that here, I don't have to do that there. But having those pieces in there so that we can do that, and that's a standard contract, and that's how we would handle it. The biggest issue is getting the information right. So in cases where that is something that happens with the providers, in some cases the staff that work with them are the ones that would be able to tell us, because they're the ones that provide that, you know, or with that provider. And it's not like we go around and police it and, you know, watch them, that kind of thing. But some of the staff who would be those that would be inclined to potentially do that are also worried,
Yeah.
right? Because they get worried about if they say something, then the provider gets upset with them and then they're going to lose their job.
To work environment.
So it kind of, like, you know, we try to monitor it by looking at like our schedules, and we try to find out like how many we have for that day, because there's a normal pattern to a lot of that. And so if we break outside that normal, then we might find out, okay, why is this like that? Why did, you know, if they normally start at 8 o'clock, what happened today? Because the first patient wasn't seen until 10. What's the story there? And so then we would have that conversation. So when I say it's a delicate situation, it absolutely is. Because again, majority of the providers, that's not an issue for, but we do have some that are an issue. And so we have to be able to take care of that when that comes.
And
Yeah.
something we could offer, if you'd like, as like Tomas and I talk on the side here, you know, one thing I haven't done yet is look at ECRMC's doctor contracts. I could do that and have a look and see, compare them and see if they have more specific language or less specific language, so that at some point, we're gonna have to come up with a common template for the combined hospital system. So I could ask Pablo for a physician agreement that they have, you know, recently executed, and see if there's different language about sort of obligations like this, or if it's the same. And then just giving you, maybe at the next board meeting, that context. Or saying, hey, they actually have language that's a little bit more specific. Would you prefer that? And then moving forward in our physician agreements, we can incorporate that language if you prefer it to the language that we have in these agreements. Because these agreements are sort of, yes, you can do different things to them.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of,
And they have these agreements here, just so that you're also aware, these have been revised quite a bit. We worked with Adriana and her team to
Yeah.
bring these a little bit more, like, there's a little bit more to it than what they.
Yeah, I can attest that the other contracts were really bad.
Yeah, and that's why, like, you know, and that's what I get, you know, I understand, like, for me, like, I hear a story, you know, everybody tells, you know, you run into people, right, and they're like, guess what, I had an appointment here, and I was supposed to be there at 9, you know, they start seeing patients, hey, well, my doctor didn't show up till 10:30, he's got a patient in full rooms, well, we work too, our time is important too, I don't get paid time off, so, you know, and I had to pay a babysitter and I do this, like, we live in a disadvantaged community. And so you have this doctor who obviously is providing like an amazing service, you know, that nobody else is doing, but like, you gotta think about your patients and their life as well, right? Because you have somebody who, they're not getting paid, say they're a field worker, they're not getting paid for that day. And whose fault is that, right? The doctor who, you know, makes more in an hour than they probably do all day, you know, and then you'd be mindful of those situations, especially in our rural clinics, you know, where they're mostly Medi-Cal, Medicaid patients, you know, I think it's super unacceptable for doctors to be like, oh, I'm not showing up today, you know, and this person, you know, schedule their time around, they schedule childcare, they do all of that. And so I just want to make sure you know, I hear too many stories of that from everybody. I want to make sure that there's policies for no retaliation that are, you know, from doctors. The last thing I want to hear is doctors creating hostile work environments because staff is holding them accountable, because that's also not acceptable. You know, so I want to make sure that there's those policies in place and that admin is holding them accountable. So if there's something saying like, staff is saying, hey, I turned the doctor in because they didn't show up till 10, they're supposed to be here at 8. Well, now the doctor's, you know, treating me horribly and retaliating against me. I want that staff member who is our staff, you know, not a contract employee, to be protected.
Quick question regarding the on-call compensation, kind of adding to is there any recourse to, let's say a doctor is getting paid $1,000 on the weekend and they refuse to come in or don't take the call? Is there any recourse to that
Yeah,
compensation?
absolutely. I mean, we would pull that. Like, and I've had a conversation with a provider here recently who we ran into that same situation where the call happened at 1 o'clock and then multiple times after that, and then the provider finally responded at 7 o'clock. And I asked the provider, I was like, do you feel like you should get paid for that time you were on call for that time? were supposed to get paid to be on call for that time, but you didn't provide that service. And basically saying, if this happens again, then you're definitely not getting paid for it, and there'll be other repercussions of that. So, yeah, I've had that conversation with providers before, absolutely.
So I come from I come from an industry where I investigated a lot of different scenarios of on-call issues. Some of them are fraudulent, some of them are, oh, this is the way we've always done business. And in particular to this industry, one of the things I've heard over time, no different than probably some of the members here, is about complaints from staff from hospitals about this on-call issue. One of the things I've heard is that sometimes a doctor is on call, but because they live outside of the county, they'll solicit another doctor and say, hey, I'll pay you half of my on-call if you do me a favor and just take it from me for the day. To me, that's unacceptable because it teeters on the side of fraud because you're not fulfilling your obligation of what you're getting paid for. And doing side deals, not that it's happening here, but doing side deals like that to me is unacceptable because to me, it's the mindset that, you know what, if I'm on call, it doesn't really matter. I'll have somebody else do it because I'm going to get the money anyway. And then what's in your heart, right? And what's in your mind, it should be patient care like Kate says. And the only way you combat that is by having protocols and processes. And I mean, not that we have to do it, but if it's one of those issues where people have to check in, like punch in or whatever, then so be it. Because the expectation is from the public, from the community, is for that doctor that's on call, you're on call, period.
Right.
And I understand those situations, like you mentioned, where a doctor could be in surgery, now he's going to be 30 minutes later, what have you. Those are totally understandable. But when it's something that you're doing it voluntarily because it, you know, so.
Yeah, and then some of those that we have to have those coverage on, I mean, there's laws associated with that, that's for intolerance, and that's the 30-minute rule, all of those things, like that's the expectation, that's the must, so.
And Chris, the other issue that's very important is because the providers are the leaders of the pack. It is very difficult sometimes for the people that work under them, the frontline staff, to report because they have out of respect and what have you, out of the chain of command. But we have to empower them to have that accountability as well about their leaders because we hold them accountable. But you as the CEO, you have to understand that you have our backing to hold them accountable. You understand? Because ultimately it's your job to protect every employee, right?
Yep. Absolutely. That's another reason why it's important to get a survey from every single person that comes into our facility as well, because that's another area that'll surface as well. I had to wait an hour for my doctor or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, those are usually the ones we do get back.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Always get a negative, yes, you.
oh, yeah.
I think we had
I
some.
think we had a.
Yeah,
Can you step up to the podium?
Daniela Flores, Imperial Valley Equity and Justice. My question is just that what you all are discussing, what is the standard practice at other hospitals outside of Imperial County? What kind of tracking system? It's super normal for all workers to have to clock in, clock out, right? And so, yeah, that was my question. Like, maybe you'll look at the contracts in El Centro and you won't be able to find any kind of solutions around the tracking and accountability. But maybe looking outside to other partners outside of this valley, we might be able to see what's the standard practice. And those obviously are probably costly upgrades, but I think possibly necessary. So just a question of what's the standard practice for that. Thank you.
Just the purpose, so everybody is aware, if we do have a situation where a call is made for a provider, it actually gets documented. Because the staff will do that. They put in there the time that they call. That's the information that I get when there is a situation like that. They'll tell when they call and then when they get a response. It's all part of the documentation that they have. And that's kind of that clocking time. And that is the standard because they document everything that they do related to that patient and that patient's care.
Mr. Grass.
I just want to encourage you guys, do what you can to protect your district. And that is with the language that's in these contracts that you, it's not already there, it needs to be put in there to indemnify and hold harmless the district against any acts or omissions that a physician might find themselves into. So we don't want the district to be on the hook for some litigation that is due to somebody else's acts or lack of acting. So I just want to encourage you that those contracts need to have things like that language in.
I'm saying, I see our attorney looking through to find.
I would be shocked if I saw an indemnity.
I was just saying, yeah.
I don't think there's a Dr. Live that would agree to that. I think they have,
I did see that a few.
I mean, that's what you
That'd
have
be fair.
insurance for, is you have malpractice insurance and you have insurance for the hospital. And that's why you have deductible thresholds, so that the hit that you take if you get sued and there's some massive malpractice issue, the hit is not, it's absorbed through your insurance. So I would be shocked if I saw that in an independent contractor agreement, like a physician agreement. The healthcare attorney that my firm reviewed this contract, although I did look at it too, and I don't recall seeing indemnity, but again, I don't think that absolutely wouldn't be a standard practice for a physician agreement. Because of that would require the physician to get like sort of personal insurance on top of whatever their med staff insurance was. But that is where malpractice insurance comes in to the picture here.
I believe these PSA contracts also require the physician to provide their own malpractice.
100%. Yeah, they have to have professional liability insurance coverage.
Maybe 1 to 3 million.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, that was my,
In the contract, it
speaker.
says 1 million per occurred claim and 3 million annual aggregate, so it's item 8. But it looks to me, that basically, if I'm understanding the contract, our main thing would be if we had a continued issue, we would terminate and look for somebody else.
yeah.
I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry. If you have somebody that's doing this on a regular basis, he's gonna be in breach of the contract because he's responsible for knowing and understanding what the standard of care is supposed to be. And we have a pretty good, I like reading the termination clauses because that seems to get us into trouble more often than not. And
Or the lack
I-
of.
the lack of, but the termination, good job, Adriana and crew. Basically, we have the ability to terminate with cause, without cause, and, I think that's where you hold their feet to the fire. And, if you have somebody that's a habitual problem, I think if you lower the boom and you let them go, the rest of them are gonna wake up and say, oh, but if you allow it to continue, then, that type of behavior begets that type of behavior. So, I think contractually, I don't see an issue with the contract. I think it's just a matter of we would have to stick to our guns and basically say you're in breach of the contract and bye. And then that affects their pay because they're no longer getting paid because they no longer have a contract. And I know we have to balance that with the fact that we're doing these bonuses and all of this. So this would lead me to believe that we really, really need this here. So I think, I get that. I mean, we've got to find a way to make here look like over the hill. And some of that's going to be a change in culture and attitude and how we do things that shouldn't cost us a penny. It should just be, we're here to take care of you, not discuss what we had for lunch or how we partied over the weekend. No disrespect to anybody in the medical profession, but I seem to have found myself in El Centro Regional. I found myself at Pioneers. I found myself at Scripps. I found myself at UCSD. And there's a cultural difference in how things are done. And I think part of that is because my husband brought up at Scripps, if you get let go, there's like 10 people waiting to take your place. And they know that. So I don't know how we do that here, but my goal is to make IVHD in the Imperial Valley Healthcare class. So, if we have doctors that aren't class, then maybe my message is it's time to go, and we'll go out there and find somebody willing to do it, knowing that we're in 118 degrees and nobody wants to be here. But we have great doctors that are here and they are working, because if I'm hearing you correctly, probably 90% of them or 95% of them are doing, and there's that 5% that always ruin it for everybody. So maybe the message needs to be, if you're that 5%, then go find somewhere else to work.
Maybe we should look for older doctors that have bone issues that can enjoy the heat.
We don't bring them out to.
So,
Young and dumb.
so I guess with all of that, I would kind of be one to kind of call for the question, and if I'm understanding correctly, with this particular contract with Dr. Suleiman, we need him. It sounds like the contract is pretty good. You're on the ball with how to deal with it, so I would make a motion to approve.
I've got one more question if you don't mind.
It does have a base compensation for year 1 and 2, and then year 3 will go into a peer RVU model. That's where it's just. There is a sign-on bonus of $50,000, a relocation of $40,000, and a buyout of $40,000. The buyout is originally Dr. Georges wasn't going to come until July, and now of next year. And he is in the process of trying to get here sooner. And so he would have to, in order to get out of his current contract, he has a buyout there. So that this would the buyout is only if he provides this documentation and the contract from his previous employer that he actually has to pay this to the employer. If he doesn't come sooner, then that is not going to be paid out.
Do you have any questions?
I had a question on both of the contracts. Sorry, I had to go back to it. What are the start dates?
Start date for GI is August 18th,
Okay,
and Dr. Georges, we're hoping for October.
October?
Yes.
Oh.
And the sign-on bonus here, relocation and all that is not signed until he starts. It's not given until he starts.
Do you have any other questions? Do you have a motion?
I so moved to approve PSA contracts with Dr. Circus.
I have a motion by Berker and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to item M. Action to authorize ACHD Association of California Healthcare District. Mr. Bjornberg.
So this is our standard due membership for ACHD. It's within my purview to obviously to be able to just do that, but because of the conversation that we've had before, I wanted to make sure I brought it to the board so you guys can have the conversation about the membership dues for that, and that's for an entire year.
Do you have any questions or motions?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Valdez and a second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We'll move on to item N. Staff recommends action to authorization to approve professional services agreement with property management advisors for facility master planning services.
So I'll take this one along with Chris. And my apologies to the board for not having the PSA in the packet, but it was being negotiated up until say 5 p.m. today. And the reason it's included in this agenda packet in the first place is because there's urgency to this. There's urgency to getting the facilities master plan going. You may recall that our goal in the request for proposals that was published for this work was to bring back a PSA for approval last board meeting with whoever with the best value or most the best sort of proposer of the folks that submitted. And then we got 2 proposals, which you guys rejected at the last board meeting, but we did do solicitation directly with some firms that we got recommended from ECRMC and other folks, and aggressively solicited proposals for assistance with facilities master planning. We ended up getting 2 good proposals, and then brought it to the board with instruction for me and Chris and Pablo to figure out who the preferred firm would be. So Pablo, Chris, and I met last Monday, right after the last board meeting, the Thursday before, and jumped on a Zoom and started talking about how do we want to do this. We need to turn a PSA by next Thursday, by today. Pablo and Chris were super proactive in coordinating with the members of those firms, both firms, interviewing them, getting on Zooms with them, talking to them that week, and came to the conclusion, I'll let Chris speak for himself, but the recommendation was going to be to go with PMA, which is Property Management Advisors, which is the firm that assisted UCSD with all of our auto master plan, and they've got extensive experience in hospital master planning in California. So we have the PSA, which is our template professional services agreement, ready to go, and we have sent it over to PMA just in case they have any input. But the issue was, a cap. Like, this board has communicated in the past that it feels more comfortable with caps so that we can track expenses with stuff like consultants, which can be quite expensive. And it's also just prudent to have for something like this, which is a finite project, a cap on expenses so that you can track expenses. And if you need to go above or below, you understand why. And we got the cap back from PMA yesterday. And we also have a rate sheet, which we would have, we need to have a rate sheet included as an exhibit to the PSA so we understand and we're contractually agreeing to. I'm going to share on the share screen so you can see it, because again, we weren't able to put it out with the agenda packet. So we didn't have it final until yesterday and today. But I'm going to show you the PMA rate sheet that was provided to us. And we'll have versions of this available to the public, if you want to move forward with it, either way. So this is the PMA schedule of hourly rates. They range from, for principals, $385 an hour, to project coordinators, which is $175 an hour. And then with respect to a cap, we asked for a sort of budget. Like, what do you see this project running at from today? And PMA has been very proactive in trying to schedule for Monday, this coming Monday, a kickoff call so they can talk to Pablo, talk to Chris, and start scheduling. Okay, we need to look at the facilities. We need to come down. We need to start doing all that important work. And they gave us a budgeted today after discussion with Chris, because they came back with a proposed budget that was exceeded what we were expecting. And so Chris was able, again, we got it yesterday at like 7 p.m. and Chris was able to jump on the phone with them today at 4 p.m. to talk about, like, let's make sure this makes sense. And so we got a revised cap, proposed cap, just show it to you here on the share screen also, of $412,000.
That is way cheaper than what I was.
Well, it's, if you look at it, the PMA portion is 180, which is cheaper than I thought the PMA portion would be. I estimated, just based on nothing, because I don't know how to do this work, but based on what I've seen in other master planning proposals of this scope, I kind of thought it would range between $2,000 and $3,000. The PMA portion is 180, but there's other folks that they need to bring in, right? Because if you're doing this master plan, you need an engineer to do this part, especially with respect to seismic evaluation. You need an architect to do preliminary design for like the very first sort of design. And there's other side of scopes that are particular that they build their team and then they crank out this work for us. So this, and their proposal has the bios, the resumes of all of their folks that they're proposing to work with. And there was a little duplication in their initial proposal because, for example, they had like a financial advisor, financial planner. It's like, well, we already have BRG and I don't want to bring someone else up to speed if we already have BRG able to do this work. So that stuff, the way that the PSA is worded, and I'll share that so that you have that sort of comfort, is the way our PSAs are always worded with something like this is you have language, and I just plugged in that $412,000 cap. I'm gonna blow this up so it's bigger, so you're not straining your eyeballs. This. You say, you know, you've got your key personnel, and then you say, you've got your cap. Oh my gosh, wait, I can find it. There's our language basically says that you do the work as authorized by IVHD. Okay, so here, you assist with facilities master planning services as described more fully in the attachment, which the attachment A is the proposal on a task basis and subject to prior authorization by IVHD. That means they say, Chris, we want to do this. And Chris says, okay, do this part of it. And then they bill you hourly and you get the fee. But then you also have the comfort of the cap at the end of the day that you know that they're not going to go over that without a written amendment that we would bring back to the board. So we do have a draft PSA. Again, it wasn't final until today. We have, as I see it, two options. And then Chris is going to give some very good news related to this sort of scope of work. But the two options for the board, you're familiar with our standard PSA. It's got similar termination provision, independent contractor language, you know, that allows us to terminate at any time, for cause, without cause. There's insurance provisions, and indemnity with this sort of firm makes sense. And we've got indemnity language in here too. Is authorizing us to move forward with executing our standard PSA with a $412,000 cap with the rates approved, the rates that I showed on the screen, which is Chris has looked at them, I've looked at them, and they're reasonable rates for their folks that would work on it. So you can give us that authorization today, or you could say, package it, bring it back, final, with all attachments, clipped, attached, here to go to the next meeting. And we're happy to do that too. The reason we're pushing for today is, again, because it's time sensitive. It's like, we need to do this work last month. Like, we need to go. And so we're inclined to recommend moving forward with PMA with this $412,000 cap tonight, and happy to answer any questions. And then I do want to give Chris an opportunity to share the good news relating to the master planning process scope, because he has some good news that he just got yesterday about it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna steal her thunder a little bit. Well, she has it in her, but I have it in mine too. So since I could go now. We were actually approved for a grant to basically pay for this kind of stuff through the SHARP program. which is done through HCI. So we have a grant of $481,000 to be able to take care of this. We're already, some of the stuff that was going to take some of the largest amount of time, structural engineering, we're already on top of that. We're in a good spot there. We just approved the geotechnical engineer for the last piece of that. So we'll have that done soon. But so all in all, we'll have that 481,000 that we didn't have before to be able to take care of this. So the team did a phenomenal job putting all the work together and getting the grant application in and everything else so that we can get this paid for. So it's not going to come out of our budget, so to speak.
Do they have a budget as to what they think the total cost would be? And maybe not, but do they anticipate that being lower than what our cap is?
So the 412 is the cap that we give them.
Right, but do they think they'll have the complete job done for that amount?
Master plan, the facilities master,
Right.
because the scope of this work is to create, at the end of the day, by November, we want like a plan in place for what our facilities are gonna look like in the combined healthcare system. Hopefully, it's like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan
Yeah.
for facilities.
Or how much work could we expect for the?
So there's going to be,
By the time we get to the.
there'll be some more work that'll happen outside of
Yeah.
that. So there'll be some civil and some MEP stuff that will actually be extra on top of what we just talked about here, most likely. And then the pieces for the geotechnical engineer, that one's like $23,000, something like that we just assigned for. And then the structural engineer, that portion of it is going to be right in line with what we've seen there already. So we'll go above our 481 that we've been given.
But we can also apply for more.
Yes.
What we did apply for about $1 million, but since some of the stuff hadn't been, actually
yet.
set in stone, they took it off the application, but I did talk to HCI 2 weeks ago and they said we can add it back in and we can use the applications as we want to continue to get the.
Because this one is the funds that are for this grant are coming from the electronic cigarette tax. And so that varies the amount that's in there from year to year. And so when they award, like ours being awarded this time, it's based off of that amount that's in there. Next year, they'll get their new pot. And like Carly said, we'll be able to apply for more at that point in time as well.
So the vision is so that you see long-term, we come back with, at the end of the day, these guys present us and help us and draft for us or help in collaboration with the board and collaboration with staff, a facilities master plan. Then when we have that, it's, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on that? It's like conceptual. It's conceptual. And then you've picked, yes, this is the concept we're going to go with. And then at that point in time, the board decides, okay, how do we want to execute this plan? Do we want to solicit a design build firm to do this for us over the next 4 years so that you're doing, because the first stage or the next stage would be like a design, like an actual construction plans to design the concept that you've created in this plan? Or do you want to do traditional design bid build, which is contract number 1 with the design firm to design and do the architecture for whatever facility implementation you're going to want, and then bid out separately a contractor for the lowest responsive and responsible bidder to come in and you put out the specs for the design, and then contractors look at it and say, I can do that design for $100 million or however much it's going to be, depending on what we're proposing to build or not build or tear down or build up. And then you make folks bid and then you go with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So there's value to the design build option and a little bit more control over stuff like change orders, but there's often value in terms of money to the traditional design bid build. That's usually cheaper, but you could run into issues there too. So, that's the long-term plan that will come out of this facilities master plan, which is really like preliminary, conceptual. What do we need to do to get to size and compliance? What do we, what's the best move in terms of they'll have to coordinate with the strategic planners for service lines and operation and that kind of stuff.
At what stage do we talk about well, I know we haven't acquired El Centro yet, but let's say we do. So wouldn't there be two plans? Like if we just don't acquire El Centro, then that's a set of plans for here. But if we do, maybe the plans of what we do here will look a little different since we have the two different facilities. At what point do we have that conversation with them when they're designing, if they're already getting an architect involved, things of that nature?
So everything that we do for this, for these initial stages, what would end up happening to that point? So let's say, you know, next week they sign, we go into escrow. So we're continuing the collaborative process, and through that collaborative process, we're saying, okay, with the way this is going to be set up, this is what strategically we'll have Pioneers campus look like. Here's what ECRMC's campus will look like. So based off of what we're saying Pioneers campus will look like, we start conceptualizing what will be there. And that's what they'll start that process with. If we get through this process and say, hey, like if it, you know, all went awry or whatever, for whatever reason, we would end up paying more money, but we would be able to kind of pump the brakes and say, if we want to change this, we want to change that, and then they would change what that looks like. But it would cost us more at that point to make that change.
And for the public's benefit, right? Just for clarification purposes, the seismic, when we say seismically compliant, what's required is where the patients are located needs to be seismically compliant, right?
Anywhere where there's going to be patient care.
Care,
So
yeah.
the way that, so
That's why it's
every
different.
piece of the building right now just is 2020 compliant, which means that it will be safe in an earthquake. So the whole building will be safe in an earthquake.
Of a certain size.
Of a certain size, yeah, like if we have like the
I think
10,
it's like
no,
six
not
or something on the
Yeah.
Richter scale or, you know, something, yeah.
So if we, the 2030 means that it's operational after something like that happens. So there's more, you know, regulations involved with that says these things have to be done in this way because we believe that if they are after an earthquake of X magnitude, you'll still be operational, hypothetically. So that's the difference between the two. So the spaces that are going to require patient care and be things that would be, you know, if in the event of an earthquake where we're going to need to provide services, those are the areas that have to meet that seismic compliance.
Is there an exception? So say we do all this and then we have another pandemic and we have to vacate this room with all tables and have patients in here. Will we run into issues, although it's an emergency? To be able to put patients in here?
Yes and no. No, because it is an emergency situation. Yes, if we don't do that right. Because
Okay.
there's still like, we have to notify and we have to do other things like that so that they understand that we're expanding our bed capacity, whether it's here, whether we put tents out or whatever the case might be, so that they understand because of this disaster that we're experiencing right now, we have a surge. And so we've done X to do that. We've done that, you know, on a simplistic basis. We've done that like in our NICU where we have X amount of beds and we're like, hey, we're going one above that, or we're going two above that because of our situation. And then we let the state know about that. And they're like, okay, let us know. And then we bring it back down. We let them know, hey, we're back down to normal. And we walk through the process with that. So in that situation where if it was another pandemic type, or if we had another mass casualty incident or something like that, then yeah, we could expand. But we would have that direct communication with CDPH and others to say, here's what our situation is, here's what we're doing. We'd probably end up with, you know, initially like calls every other hour and then every day and so on until we figure out how that plays out.
I'm gonna say, so usually I'm not like super, you know, I like to see it all, but like we have to have building permits by January 2026, right?
We have the construction,
Construction,
yeah, like our contractor, like,
Yeah.
that we're gonna tell them that these are the guys that are gonna do it.
yeah, so we don't have time like this,
No.
we're already pushing it, so,
Yeah, I
Would
mean,
actually-
even this ambitious timeline of starting next week and finishing by November is very ambitious. And that assumes we'll get a good plan in place and this board will agree to do something like a design build so that we could bid it out and get someone on board in December. That's very, very ambitious.
Yeah.
It,
My
it may not be accomplished.
It's my experience, design builds. If you have somebody, you keep the engineers and contractors from fighting all the time, because when you have an engineer or designer that
Sure, yeah.
designed somebody else's plan, well, they don't like it and they think it should be this way, and then that's where you really get held up in change orders, and it just makes.
Sure. And then everyone's pointing fingers at each other with a bad design. No, the design's fine.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah, so it's,
Okay, I guess I would bring back to the question. That seems to be me all the time, but I think, given what I'm hearing, the facility master planning services are gonna be hopefully answering a lot of these questions.
Yes.
Because it's their job to look at all of this and give us their recommendations. Time is of the essence. I think I'm comfortable with the 412,000 cap at the moment. I am super happy. And way to go, team, for
Yeah.
the 481,000 with the possibility of more to try and cover that. So all of that being said, I move that we accept the staff's recommendation, because it sounds like you've done your homework behind the scenes, and I am comfortable with the work that you have done. So I would be willing to make that motion to accept your recommendation and hire PMA.
Great.
As recommended.
Do you have a second?
I second.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Good job, Carly and team.
Any
Yeah,
opposed?
good job, guys.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now move on to the appointment of ad hoc bylaws committee.
Yes, so this stems from the discussion we had last board meeting about revising the bylaws and starting to establish some of the standing committees and addressing the inconsistency between the current IVHD bylaws and the PMHD bylaws, and with respect to committees and how they're appointed. One of the requests coming out of last board meeting was to also circulate the ECRMC bylaws, which we did to this board earlier this week, and they're attached to the agenda packet, so that you can have the 3 different bylaws that are applicable to the 2 hospitals. And again, it's like IVHD's bylaws control, but to the extent, but we also agreed to adopt PMHD's bylaws when we absorbed PMHD. So a bylaws review and revision is high time we do it. The timing is, at the pleasure of the board. And I think the discussion at last board meeting was, let's get that started, because we don't want to do it so early that we don't capture ECRMC, but we don't want to do it so late that we don't have it lined up and ready for when we close. So the idea would be that we would get these bylaws, do a comparison between the 3, pick the stuff that we like best, incorporate UCSD/ECRMC so that if and when the new bylaws are approved, they're ready to go for the combined hospital system. And we don't have to do another review or revision after ECRMC comes into the mix. The specific discussion sort of revolved around committees and like what standing committees would the Pioneers bylaws don't identify a standing committee. The IVHD bylaws do, but haven't formed it yet. They have 2 different ways of forming committees. The IVHD bylaws have the board appointing folks to committee by majority action. The PMH bylaws had the board president just appointing members of committees. So it's what we're recommending is to appoint an ad hoc. That would be a bylaws review ad hoc, so that we can be nimble and work with, 2 or 3 of you, has to be less than a quorum of the board, to work with staff in putting together a draft of revised bylaws that we can bring back to this board for full approval. But of course, it's really helpful to have, I think at this point, discussion at the board level. And I circulated, I think Director Garcia asked at the last board meeting, can you remind us what committees are like available and what they're supposed to sort of do? So I circulated that, and that's attached to the agenda packet too. Those are just ideas for options for standing committees, with a reminder that standing committees that are formed by this board are subject to the Brown Act. So you've got to have public meetings, they've got to have agendas, minutes, and And those would be public committees, the public, committees, forward-facing committees that you would have, an obligation to have public meetings. So, again, today, the action is forming a bylaw ad hoc that can work with us, the revised bylaws, make these decisions on committees and et cetera, and then bring back a recommendation for approval by the full board. And then to the extent you want to weigh in right now on, hey, I'd really like to see these committees, or I'd really like to see this form of appointment to the committees, please speak now so that both we staff and whoever is appointed to the ad hoc has that like information going into the process, because at the end of the day, the ad hoc's just going to bring back a recommendation, but it's going to be up to the full board to approve the revised bylaws.
So I also took a stab at, I would say that I've been just sitting and like kind of thinking and looking at other healthcare districts and what they do. And so I sent that to Adriana and she gave me her like recommendations on it. But I would like to be on the bylaws ad hoc if you guys don't mind. I'm like a super nerd with bylaws and I've looked at like every healthcare districts. Like I can tell you which ones in California I like and which ones I don't like and which ones are junk. And
That is true. She shared with me.
I would say I have a Google Drive of all of them with like notes and stuff on it. So
I did get she made a really cool chart with bylaws and like who would be on it and then who else would be, like, what's the purpose? And that I would like to see a chart like that in the bylaws.
Yeah,
I
me
love
too.
charts. I
Me
love a
too.
good chart and like an easy reference
Yeah.
guide.
So easy.
And then who besides the appointed board members would be required attendees. So some committees would have CFO, CEO, and other committees might have like a community member or, so that level of detail is great.
Yeah.
And then each committee, once formed, would have its own set of bylaws that are super, those are really, could be mellow. Those can be like 2-pagers that it's just like, what's, when do you meet, standing meetings, and again, it says like the purpose, sort of the charter of that committee is stated in there. And you would just have like a real short summary of what that committee is in the bylaws.
So would there be in those committees, whichever one it is, taking into account what you said about having people from staff and stuff like that on them?
Yeah.
Would it be a blend between some people from PMH and then some people from ECRMC? Or would it be a bigger committee?
the goal is to just make it all IVHD.
Yeah, so what would happen is, for example, if you're doing the finance committee, you're gonna meet with the finance group, which is whatever that group is from both sides, right? So, because it's one side at that point. And the same thing, the quality committee, there's like a quality group that already meets. And so then they do their meeting and then there's a meeting with the quality committee or the quality, committee for the board.
Yeah.
And you meet with that quality group and they go over the quality report, what happened in the meeting. It goes out from there. Strategic committee, for example. Same thing. There's a group of us that would be part of that strategic planning process. And when those meetings happen, that strategic planning committee would be part of that process at that point in time. And so you're part of that group that's part of that. So there's very few outside of and generally even like the bylaws committee has different members of the team on it as well. But I'm not sure of any committee that's straight like board members only. And they're usually part of the different things that are going on within the organization and the teams that are
Right.
associated with those.
So, and then there's an important distinction between voting members, because board-formed committees are typically comprised of board members. And then you have required attendee, like staff comes in and there's no need to have this version of staff at this board meeting. But the folks that are voting on stuff, so for example, that do the deep dive into the financials and they want to recommend approval to the board. That's typically board members only. And so you'd have a committee of 3 people or a committee of 4 people or however many people you decide you want on this committee. And then a majority of so if you have a 3-person finance committee, you need at least 2 of those people to show up to have quorum, and you need at least 2 of those people to say, yeah, I approve these financial reports. And then the report to the board at the regular board meeting, which makes it go a lot faster, usually it's the idea, is this is a recommendation of the finance committee. They've done that deep dive for you. And you could do the deep dive yourself outside of the board meeting or, whatever, or you can call your buddy on the finance committee and say, everything good today? Yes, no, maybe so. But the thought is that those are the voting members of the committee. And so you typically wouldn't have something like a community member or a staff member on that committee because it's a legislative body subject to the Brown Act. And so you typically only have elected officials or appointed officials as voting members of the committee. But then like Chris is saying, you have other required committee, you wouldn't say committee members, but they're non-voting committee members who are attending those meetings because they're doing all the work. Like they're the folks that are doing all the work for you. So yeah. There's a lot of different ways to do committees. They can be super valuable and really streamline work streams. And so some of the ideas for committees is the governance committee, and the governance committee would be the folks that would keep an eye on the bylaws and say, all right, every year, every 2 years, do we need to freshen this up? Do we need to bring back recommendations? But the purpose of today's ad hoc agenda item is to have this like ad hocs always have to be finite in scope. You have to identify like an end. And so the end would be, we bring back bylaws for this group to approve. But besides the governance committee, which also would be aligned with sort of like board procedures, policies, like you could review the policies, you could review best practices. You can make sure board education, that kind of stuff. We've also, I had an advocacy and outreach committee that is like, that would be focused on legislative efforts, regulatory efforts, lobbying, going to Sacramento, talking to folks, do stuff with residents that supports the district's work. Executive comp is not an unusual committee, but it would make a whole lot of sense in light of the JCA here. But strategic planning committee is one that could be ad hoc actually, but also it's a good idea as a standing committee because you're gonna have a 5-year strategic plan. And it's like reviewing it quarterly or however often to hold BCSD feet to the fire. Audit, compliance, and ethics is another very typical committee, sometimes also called safety and quality. And they're the ones that meet with the quality committee, and bring back recommendations to this board. So again, the purpose of today is to decide whether you want to form a bylaws ad hoc, which is the recommendation, no matter who should be on it. But to the extent you want to weigh in on committees, it would be a welcome discussion.
Perfect.
Okay,
How about we do the bylaws?
I think I'm feeling schizophrenic again because we're mixing things together.
Yeah.
So today,
And I think we need to come up with our bylaws committee.
right.
And I would like to be on that committee. I mean, I'm kind of miss policies and procedures, and I feel like getting our bylaws right is how we're going to change the culture and change the way things may have been done in the past. But, I would like to do that, but I'm not gonna try and bump anybody else out that possibly wants to do that as well. But I think we need to get that done before we start convoluting the process with
Right.
doing the job of the bylaws committee to get all this done.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think at the last meeting, we did pretty much decide that we want the committees to be appointed by the board, not by the guards and safety rails in for future boards to not have one person doing it all. It puts it back in the hands of the board. So like it's convoluted. So I want to bring us back to the point of order, which is who do we want for our ad hoc committee?
Okay, so I've said interest, Laura said interest.
I'm interested.
Well, now I have 4.
Well, there's been many ways of resolving it. It has to be less than a quorum. And another thing I've done I had a district board where all 7 folks wanted to be on the ad hoc, and we drew hats, right? We drew names out of a hat. It was like we didn't know how to, no one knew how to concede. So happy to do that. We can do that right now in real time. I got paper.
So although I'm interested in it as well, I would really love for Laura and 80 to be on it, since they are powerhouses in that area. With regard to myself and Enola, I leave it up to whoever wants to assign either of us.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, you could rock, paper, scissors. Any other thoughts from any board members on how to resolve the,
I think I have a quarter.
yeah, you could do.
I probably make better ribs than she does. So.
Oh, now you're speaking with Amy, food, and cook off.
Well, do we want to just, write 2 names on a piece of paper? And then leave it to,
James the pick.
sure. If this is acceptable to the board, I just will make the names up here. Do a little. If you want, is this okay? Because you guys are the ones who are picking.
Hold on,
That's fine. I'm fine with it. I'll just step out.
You don't have to.
I was ready to do it. I was ready to make them pick a hand.
No, that's fine. I think,
Having Enola, Mr. Proctor, Miss Barker, and Miss Burnworth.
yeah,
Okay, you want to withdraw your name from the pool?
yeah.
I was looking forward to picking, man.
I know.
What would you have picked?
Okay.
Sounds like this is something to put in the bylaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the idea of rock, paper, scissors personally.
That's what I
That
was,
should be in there, yeah.
that will be in the bylaws.
I was looking forward to
That'll make it more fun.
In the case of more than a fourth, I will be rock, paper, scissors, compass.
Okay, well, so
I
the
kind
ad
of feel
hoc,
like with Enola and with those 3, I mean, they're not making decisions other than to bring
Right.
a
Right,
product to us that we will be able to
weigh in on.
review and weigh in on, and I think they all understand the direction that we're
Yes.
going to try and stop things from happening the way they happened before,
Agreed.
so I am not one that's going to, like, I don't know, just not my personality, so.
Okay, so the proposed,
So we have a motion, do we need to make a motion?
yeah, someone needs to make a motion, but the proposed motion on the table for someone to make would be to appoint an ad hoc committee for review of the bylaws, comprised of Director Proctor, Director Berger, and Director Burnworth.
I so move, but Proctor mentioned ribs though.
Subject to.
Subject to.
Of the-
Well, I'm
To the taste of ribs. I'll bring mine too.
So you have that, Brenda.
I will not be here. All right, do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
I have a motion by Garcia and a second by Valdez. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Great, and I'll be in touch with you 3 to start putting up those Zooms so we can start the meeting.
Do we have finance report?
Just a quick update. So we some have big cash going out in the next few months. So over the next 3 months, we're gonna have about $10.4 million going out. The next, hopefully 2 weeks, we're gonna close escrow on the property down there. So that's about $3.8 million. We do have IGT for 2 of our IGT is 3.4 million due August 22nd. And rate range is due in October of 3.2 million. Those usually take anywhere between October, November, December, January to get back is what they say. Last year, we got one back within a month. Sometimes it's been 2 months. So then we'll get $18.4 million back over 6 months. I won't go too far into it, but some of the, Medicaid cuts are coming. We don't know how to really figure out how that's going to affect us just yet. Except for in 2 circumstances, the dish cuts, which is already in our budget because every year the federal government's been trying to, cut the dish from us. So it's about $1.5 million. But like I said, we've already put that in the budget for fiscal year 26. And then the Medicare sequestration would be about maybe $300,000 to $600,000 a year less payments that we would receive for that. So those are the only 2 that I do kind of have numbers on. But once we find out more, we'll update you guys.
It's not here.
She's actually online now.
She have a
her
report?
report.
Yeah, she has.
Good evening, everyone. I do have the CNO report. I just want to draw attention to the transfer report. I did go ahead and at this time around.
Carol,
some
can you
inform-
speak up? Sorry, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh. mm. Um, Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to point out for the transfer report this time around, I did add some information regarding incoming transfers. I do want to share what the limitations are. Currently, we are using a log in the ER, house supervisor, and OB area to try and track those transfers. So from January to May 15, I have 15 incoming transfer requests documented, but I suspect there's more than that. And this log did not capture the ones coming in from the skilled nurse facility. So I have reached out to IT to see how we can get the information from Cerner. It doesn't look right now like we're capturing the data during the registration process. So it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out how we can better capture that information. So it could be more, we could all be reassured that the numbers are correct. So I just wanted to point that out. The other pieces, we are working with ECRMC to look at any transfer requests that we decline either ECRMC or Pioneers so that we can review those and, see what the issues were and we could try and resolve them so that we prevent those transfers from being sent out instead of staying here locally. So I'm happy about that. And the report was submitted before, so if you have any questions about any other information, I'd be happy to answer on that.
Carol, I do have a question. On the list of accepting facilities, we have Hospital Americano, and I just looked it up. It's in Mexicali, so we make transfers to Mexicali.
So that one was just the one transfer. I haven't seen that before. It might have been a request from the family to go over there due to insurance. Because I haven't seen it where we're transferring to Hospital Americano before. There's just that one in this year.
Okay, can you get some more information on that?
Yeah, I'll go back and look at the comments and then
Yeah,
I'll
the SIMSA insurance.
Insurance or.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's why it's usually the family who's wanting to, be transferred out there. I think when we had COVID, there was some of that, but I haven't seen it in a long time. So I'll go back to the cases and I'll review it and then I'll send an email so that it could be shared with the board members.
And when we make that transfer, it's via ambulance traveling through the border all the way there.
Yeah,
Really?
and then what they do is they'll usually, whether they're coming this way or they're going that way, they'll meet at the border and they'll do the transfer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other questions?
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And we'll move on to clinics operation. Probably some more.
The report is in the packet. If you have any questions, please let me know, or if anything stands out to you. I will take note for the RHCs. We did add back the nephrology line of service. So they're coming weekly to Calexico and to the Pioneers Health Center. So referrals are starting off slow, but eventually it'll get there. You will see a decrease in many of the clinics for patient visits. We normally see that from June to August, July. We have in July of next month, you'll really see it. We have a lot of providers out on PTO. So we still have coverage in all the different areas, but there will be a decrease in visit. Open notes. This is the report for June. I did look at it today. We're about 98% for all clinics. We do have a ambulatory provider meeting next week where we will, discuss with them the importance of closing their notes within 72 hours, and most providers are there. We have 3 lines of services that we're still working on, but I have faith that we'll get there. And that's some of the key points. Some of the grants, one of the past cited grant, we're still waiting to see if it was approved. We submitted that on 5/2. That is over $1 million grant. for our healthcare management program. So we're really looking forward to see if we get granted that.
Gosh, I had a question on the nuclear med. Have we resolved that or
Nuclear med, yes, we have a track
and for how long?
6 months right now. And then we're talking with ECRC to see how we can work together.
Thank you.
Do we have any urgent care updates?
No, just, kind of, adding on to what the colleagues have said, the education collects also reported lower numbers, and it's very typical for the summertime. We'll also be scheduling, I'll be working with our CEO to schedule a final walkthrough with the builder for the urgent care. And that way we could release them, and then they'll also be coming up in the future with the final payments to the companies for the discretion. That's all.
CEO and Mr. Bjornberg.
All right, so a couple of things just to make you guys aware of. We have an affiliation agreement with Scripps, as you guys are well aware. That agreement actually ends on the 19th of this month. So all the stuff was put in motion for that. So just wanted to make you guys aware. We'll be making adjustments to other things that have that affiliation on there that we'll be pulling off. But that does end on the 19th of this month's next week. The end of next week, I guess. Then we had last week had the opportunity to speak with the city council here in Brawley and give them an update on things that were going on at their request. It went pretty well. The questions that were asked were the typical ones that we hear. We did get a couple new ones this time because of the big beautiful bill that had essentially recently this passed to the Senate. So there were some questions about the provision in there for rural healthcare and the $50 billion that's going to be there and how much of that they thought that we would get. Probably realistically for us, that's going to be next to nothing that we would actually get out of that because of all the stipulations that are a part of that, and the states have to do a lot of stuff to get that money too. And we're not exactly on the good list right now as far as California is concerned. Did report that out there. Some good questions about other things that are going on as far as how things might work with the two groups coming together, pensions, jobs, those typical questions that we hear, we're able to answer them there as well. And then outside of that, we had, I want to talk just briefly about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We've had an opportunity this week to have some discussion with the California Hospital Association about this. We had our board meeting yesterday as the Hospital Association of San Diego and Imperial County. And so that was a big part of their conversation, our conversation in there. And there's a lot of unanswered questions at this point in time. And it'll probably be that way for a little bit as everything really kind of gets unpacked and see how it really will start to affect some of those different areas. Carly mentioned a couple areas that we're watching as well. But there's a big chance as far as how this can really change the landscape as far as some of our thought processes on things that we're doing right now, how that could change. So as we get more information on how all this stuff will play out, definitely let you know. There's a lot of, DHLF, which is the District Hospital Leadership Forum. That's a big one because they're going to be able to really hone in on us as a district and what that means. And so we're really waiting for that analysis to come through and seeing what that looks like from them. And of course, what that can look like from our rural health clinics and kind of everything else. For us in particular, because of our location and really not just location, but also our payer mix that we have here, it has the potential to do quite a bit. So it's something that we're definitely monitoring very, very closely at this point in time to see what kind of adjustments we have to make. That's one thing that we do in healthcare all the time. We're always constantly adjusting on the fly. We're always constantly looking, okay, how do we make this work as we move forward? This isn't going to be any different. We may have to pull out a few, some of us, we have some tricks in our sleeve that we can use for things before. Probably going to have to come up with a few new ones with this one as well. So a lot to unpack probably over the next couple months. So more conversation on that. And as we get, again, more of that information, we'll definitely get that out to you guys as a board so you have that information as soon as possible. So that's essentially my report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take it.
Sorry.
I would just say that, if you're saying we have a lot to unpack, I would like to know things ahead of time before they come to prices, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're all waiting.
Beautiful surprise.
Yeah.
Beautiful surprise, yes.
And I say that because we have a lot to handle, but then on top of these changes, like you're talking about the big, beautiful bill and all that stuff, we have to incorporate that into our thought process as to how we're gonna be making decisions, and it may ultimately change our strategic plan as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I say as soon as I know anything about it, we'll definitely let you guys know.
Sorry, Nola.
Oh, no, that's okay, that's okay. What's the savings on the scripts affiliation?
12,000.
A year?
144,000 a year.
12,000 a month.
12,000 a month?
Mhm.
Okay, so that goes back in the budget, or was it already taken?
No, actually, that was the public.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, because we didn't know
so,
the timeframe on it.
So
So we don't know any money as of when it terminates? We don't know them any money?
Correct.
With that, do we have any items for future agenda? Or Adrian? do you have
No
anything?
update today.
I don't think so. Any future agenda items?
I would like to have a discussion at the next meeting as far as the schedule, as far as the board schedule goes. Just so that we do make some of these changes, in particular, we know that we probably will have to make the one in September. Because we have a board meeting scheduled when everybody's going to be at IVHD. And so if we need to make some adjustments there, I want to be able to make sure that we give the med staff enough time to make the changes that they need to, so that they can have all their stuff in, so that we can get things approved for them. So we could maybe look at that this next board meeting, making some adjustments to the upcoming board schedules. I think we got to at least have that discussion.
That was already on the schedule.
So we have, the board meeting schedule is online and the board approved it and revised it. But, currently the board meetings that are regular board meetings, regularly scheduled board meetings is 2 weeks from today, which is July 4th. And then there's August 14, August 28, and then they go to monthly after that. Because remember, we talked about every 2 weeks meetings for 6 months while we were in the term sheet and ATA phase. And hopefully, I mean, we've already approved both of those. So, but as we know, these board meetings, even every 2 weeks, have gone quite long. So, it is a good discussion. The board meeting dates are online. It is a matter of, do you want to switch over? When's the ACHD conference?
It's the end of September.
The end of September?
Yeah.
Okay,
But the issue is like the way that we're scheduled right now, and part of, you're correct, part of it is because of how we have these other things we're working on. But the other reason why we did it too was to be able to accommodate for
Yes.
both financials, because they're not going to be done in
the
Enough
second,
for-
by the
yeah.
second Thursday of the
And
month,
then
right?
for MEC, be able to make sure that we can get all those people that are going to be credentialed and privileged, so we can pass them so that they can continue to provide service. So we can't do those two pieces on that second Thursday, by the second Thursday of the month, which is why we added this on there.
Right, so the ACH, so there's technically no. So ACHD is 9/24 through 9/26. Currently, 9/25 is not a board meeting date because we stopped the every 2 weeks in August. But we have this issue with respect to the second Thursday of the month isn't late enough to do financials or.
Can't you just like stagger them so they go that way?
You mean so if it's continues to be second Thursday, for example, September 11th, October 9th, you would do September's financials on October 9th?
We would only be able to do August.
August.
That'd be
August.
I'm sorry, August financials on October 9th.
So we could do, but depends on how most of this month.
Right, yeah,
The
exactly.
MEC one will be the one that could be problematic
Because
because
they meet the third.
they usually will, like, what we're approving is for them to be able to start at that next month and still have privileges going forward. And there technically could be up to 2 weeks-ish timeframe that technically we don't have them approved to be able to provide services in our hospital and so forth, because they end at the end of this month and we need to start the privileges at the beginning of the next month.
So sounds like, yes, it's a good idea to have an agenda item at the
Yeah.
next board meeting to discuss board meeting dates.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Visiting out on our bus, where all visitors bring the vacation areas and access to the yellow. Thank you. Atención, por favor. Las horas de visita han terminado. Pedimos que por favor todos los visitantes se retiren por la salida de la gente. Gracias.
Well, with that, we can go into closed session. Because the hours are over.
Okay,
Everyone to close that?
yeah.
Good five.
Is our like?
Yeah, so I.
Yeah.
No, nice to meet you. Yeah. But really sensitive to you. You're working on those things.
Yeah, no, this is pretty, besides everything else. I think it's,
Once we,